We've got Megan O'Brien from the Patriots with us to help us break down all the storylines we need to know on the Patriots side of things before kickoff on Sunday. All right, Megan, the Patriots are 2-4 through 6 games. Not necessarily the Patriots team that a lot of Bills fans are known to facing. I mean, what has been their struggle not being able to pick up more wins? This is still a Bill Belichick team, even without Tom Brady. They're known for their defense. So I guess you've seen this team since the start of the season in training camp. What can you point your finger on as to maybe why they haven't been as successful as some people have thought they would in the first 6 games?
Well, you say it right there, Maddie. 2-4 Patriots. That doesn't sound right. And when you watch the game on Sunday, it didn't look like a typical Patriots team. And yesterday I was actually doing an interview with someone from the Buffalo media group, and I asked him, is this still the big, bad Patriots who dominate the AFC East? Is this how the Buffalo Bills are approaching this game? And he said that Coach McDermott is approaching it that way, but it certainly is a different team. For starters, there's no Tom Brady, which changes the dynamic of the team. There is Cam Newton. And heading into the season, there was a lot of promise with Cam Newton at quarterback, but things just haven't clicked together. I was willing to give them a pass after they lost the game against Denver. Just leading up to that game, they didn't have a lot of practice. They didn't have preparation time. They were dealing with a coronavirus outbreak, which is stressful for a team. But then the performance they put together last week against the 49ers, there's no excuse for that. That didn't look like a well-executed football game. The turnovers were certainly a problem, and the Patriots have a lot of questions to answer. Stephon Gilmore, the reigning deep boy, he hasn't played up to expectations. And it all really starts, though, with Cam Newton. Now, he isn't the only problem. There are certainly other problems on the team. They have a lack of weapons. Their tight ends have not been involved at all. The running game hasn't been able to get started. But it starts with Newton and not turning over the football.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Cam Newton. He had a tough go in last week's game against the 49ers. The Patriots over the last 3 games are averaging under 10 points a game. Based on what Cam has said and what you've seen of him in practice, do you have a handle on maybe why we haven't seen the Cam Newton that we did see in the beginning of the year?
Maddie, I've been thinking a lot about that, and it's tough to listen to what he says because he says all the right things. When he plays bad, he's the first one to go on the radio or confess in any interview that he didn't play well enough. There's no hiding it for Cam Newton, and he's one of the best interviews or sound bites out of any of the Patriots in that locker room. But to me, Cam Newton hasn't really changed his play all that much. We saw these struggles in training camp. We saw many passes get batted down at the line of scrimmage. We saw him struggling to adapt to the New England system. Now, obviously, Cam Newton is a specimen, and he's a heck of an athlete. So he won the starting quarterback position in New England that was deemed a competition between Brian Hoyer, Jarrett Stidham, and Cam Newton. It was obvious to me that Cam Newton was going to win the starting quarterback position. But that game against Miami, the one that opened the season, I look back and I think, did the Patriots steal a game because Miami didn't account for Newton the runner and they didn't account for the running game that the Patriots had? Because since then, Newton hasn't been very productive. You can point to the Seattle game and say, wow, the Patriots were right there. They were one play away. But they were chasing the entire fourth quarter. And Newton was able to connect with Edelman on some chunk plays. He connected with N'Keal Harry, which was a promising sight. But they really weren't in that game. In the game against Las Vegas, Newton had little to do with the win. And then you have the last 2 games against Denver and the 49ers, where Newton's been a disappointment. Obviously, you take out the Kansas City game because he wasn't involved in that game. But the Patriots held their own against the Chiefs without their starting quarterback. To me, it just seems like he's thinking too much. He's struggling to adapt, and he's not playing as confident as the Cam Newton we saw in Carolina was playing.
Yeah, I mean, Cam is very important to this team. Of course, he's the quarterback. He's back on the field after being off the field with COVID-19, but you also have to rely on those weapons. I mean, Edelman has struggled a little bit. So has N'Keal Harry. You have a running game that you guys can use, but it seems like the running game kind of goes through Cam Newton, and he's got to get those first couple carries on the ground for that run game to really get started. So what do you think is the key for the Patriots to be able to put up a fight in this game against the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, Maddie, you mentioned the run game. One of the issues with the running game is they've had a lot of moving parts on the O-line. David Andrews was out with a thumb injury. Joe Thuney left the game. They've inserted rookies, and it's just been a makeshift line for the past couple of weeks. And I think that's definitely impacted the running game as well. Damian Harris is a second-year player who's had a lot of promise. He's looked okay. I would say he's looked okay, but the running game overall needs to be better, and it does start with Cam Newton. Edelman, he's banged up. He's been banged up for really the last 3 to 4 years of his career, but it seems to have taken on a different level this season for Edelman. The productivity just hasn't been there. And N'Keal Harry, he's a second-year player who really hasn't caught on yet. The first-round pick, we waited all last year to see when the N'Keal Harry game would be. He was on IR for the first half of the season, and it still hasn't come yet. So N'Keal Harry now dealing with a concussion, you look at the Patriots' weapons and you don't have much. I think the Patriots are going to need to find a passing game. They're going to need to establish the run. And it starts on defense too, because you mentioned at the top of this, Bill Belichick's teams are known for defense. Where was the defense against the 49ers? There's all kinds of issues on this Patriots team, but they have to play ahead. They have to have a solid start, put themselves in a position to play with the Bills, establish the run, take care of the football, no turnovers, and the Patriots with Bill Belichick as their coach, they can compete with anyone if they do those things.
Yeah, I'm thinking like as game planning wise, what Sean McDermott and his team are trying to do is, of course, stop that run because, like you said, the passing game has struggled as of late with some players who are banged up who won't be able to play in this game. But you point to that offensive line. It seems like they're going to be together again for the second straight game. So maybe that's something that will help out the run game. But fingers crossed that our defensive line can stop those offensive linemen. But who do you think is a Patriots player that many might not know that the Bills will need to look out for in this one?
Well, ever since Rob Gronkowski left the Patriots and retired and then eventually became a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, the Patriots have had a hole at the tight end position. Now, back in the spring, they traded up and drafted 2 tight ends in Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene. We haven't seen either make much of an impact on this season. But Dalton Keene was active last week, and I think he showed a little bit of promise. He played just over 20 snaps, and I think he's a building piece that the Patriots offense can work around. I'd like to see him get involved and have some tight end contributions.
Unfortunately, our Bills defense has allowed quite a few tight end yards. In part, that's because one of our linebackers, Matt Milano, has been in and out with an injury the last couple weeks, but I think he's going to be healthy for this one, so he could be somebody who would go up against that tight end. But you spoke about it in the beginning of this, and Bills media, Bills fans maybe thinking this isn't the same Patriots, this might not be the same matchup, but hey, even if it's not the same matchup, even if there's no Tom Brady, even if this Patriots team is 2-4, the Patriots have won pretty much every game against the Buffalo Bills since 2016. That's the last time the Bills beat the Patriots. And a lot of people say, oh, that's not even really a win because Tom Brady wasn't on the field for that game. But is this year's matchup a little more intense than last year? Maybe just because the Patriots look quite different and they're going up against the current division leaders. Maybe the tables are a little bit flipped on this one in that the Patriots are the ones who are coming from behind to face the Bills. Usually it's the other way around.
Well, Maddie, what's interesting is for the first time in 20 years, there's questions about what the goal is of this season in New England. For the last 20 years, the goal has been to win a Super Bowl. And the Patriots have done a pretty good job of that. But you look, the November 3rd trade deadline, what are the Patriots going to do? If they beat the Buffalo Bills, they're right back in the division hunt. If they lose to the Buffalo Bills, are you trading Stephon Gilmore? Are you looking at your roster and saying, how can we build for the future? So I think a lot is predicated on this game and how the Patriots perform. And it's going to tell us a lot about the rest of the 2020 season for the Patriots.
Megan, is going to be an interesting matchup to say the least. So much at stake for this one. I mean, the Buffalo Bills could go undefeated in the AFC East with a win. If the Patriots grab a win, like you said, they're back in the hunt for that division title. Surely this AFC East looks completely different this season. So many question marks for the Patriots, for the Bills, for the Dolphins, with Tua finally playing for the Jets. Not so much, but we'll see how this Sunday matchup goes. Megan, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Maddy, thanks so much.